2026 is going to be an awesome year. We got some pretty cool stuff coming up. First off, we got Foundations of Recovery. This is our flagship program. We're starting it in January.
This is for anyone, man, woman, or couple who wants to come and reclaim their heart from shame, trauma, and betrayal. We start off with an education on all sorts of principles, give you the common language. We feed you from a fire hose in terms of all things recovery.
It is such a great start to recovery. And we get at the roots of things, Tyler. This isn't like any other program. Like, this is our healing journey in process, and Foundations is where we begin.
If you look at the value that you're getting there to kick off a good recovery with all of the right education, all of the right language, and a team to get you started while also being directed by Brannon and myself through the whole process, what a deal.
So if you're interested, if you're struggling, if you've been wanting to do something for a long time, jump into this. This only comes around every so often, and we would love to have you there.
Click the link in the description to sign up for it. And to make it even sweeter, we're also including a raffle for a free pass to the Radiant Dawn retreat. Anyone who signs up for Foundations will be added to the raffle for that free Radiant Dawn pass. If you're a man and you sign up for Foundations, your name still gets entered, and you can give that pass away if you win it to any woman that you want to.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is if you sign up and participate in Foundations, you could possibly go to Radiant Dawn for free?
That's exactly what I'm saying, which is crazy because Foundations by itself is already an insane value.
Man, I sound so salesy. But it actually is awesome. So come to Foundations. And even if you don't come to Foundations, sign up for Radiant Dawn. It's beyond therapy, the best healing experiences that you can have.
Click the link below and come join us.
What if my spouse and I differ with our direction in faith?
Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers.
We're therapists.
And we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin.
Brannon, what's going on, man?
I don't know. Just one day at a time, you know? What's going on with you?
I had a kind of just a cool, normally my daughter doesn't like to my youngest daughter doesn't like to hang out with me much anymore because she's in that space where she'd rather hang out with her friends or her boyfriend or whatever. And this Saturday, she had no plans, luckily, somehow, and I invited her to go up into the mountains with me to check our trail cameras for the animals that we're watching for the upcoming season. And she came with me, and not only did she come with me, it took a while. I think there's this little tech barrier where you go on a hike for the first half hour, your kid goes through withdrawals, and they just kind of ignore you for a while. But then she started to open up and talk. And for the next 4 hours, she just talked and talked and talked.
Oh, wow.
And she even said at the end of it that she enjoyed her time with me. So that was an awesome weekend.
Oh, yeah. You had a great weekend. Good job.
Notch that one up, save that one up in the archives because it might not happen anytime soon.
All you had to do is get her out in the mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what the mountains do. I've always said that it seems to me that there's nothing too big that Mother Nature can't hold. So you get your kids out there and let nature do the work. So,
well, I think especially in those times, teenagers and, when they're not going out of their way to talk to you. Somebody told me once, they said, do two things with your teenagers. Get a hot tub because they're forced to sit there and with you and they loosen up. And so they'll start talking and they're with you.
Most parents are too afraid to have a hot tub for what the kids do when you're not home.
Well, that too. Yeah, that's true. But or get them into skiing because they're forced to sit on a ski lift with you and they're having fun and they're in nature and I've found that one to be really true. So I don't have a hot tub right now. Maybe I need to work on that. But
you do the ski pass, which is awesome.
Yeah. So, Tyler, I don't want to waste any more time with you. I'm just kidding. But I have one of my favorite people here, so I want to get into it with her and get into the topic we have. So we have Valerie Hamaker here with us today, and we have a lot in common. Her and I are podcasters and platform builders and also therapists. So We've just connected through podcasting, and then have become friends and help each other in our work. And she has built an amazing platform and is helping so many people. And I'm going to let her talk about what she has going and what she's doing. But I just want to introduce her to the show, and I'm really excited about the content that we get into today. So, Valerie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brannon and Tyler. I am so grateful to be invited to be here with you both. And Brannon, I mean, I don't know you, Tyler, so sorry. I'm going to just kind of focus on Brannon for a second. But Brannon, you are so near and dear to my heart. You have been one of my most important professional mentors, and you become a dear friend. And because of that, as he knows, and you are now all going to be learning, when I am in a pinch professionally, unfortunately for him, he's one of the first people I call. So,
well, as Tyler knows, so Tyler runs a lot of groups, and Valerie runs a lot of groups. Group dynamics are complex. You never know what's going to happen. And so it's really important to have support. But could you talk about your groups that you run, Valerie, and what you have going?
Yes. So I am, as Brannon mentioned, I am a licensed professional counselor, and my work started sort of just traditionally running a private practice, which I loved. But oddly enough, Brannon is part of even the evolution of my professional life. We together decided to start the Latter-day Struggles podcast. And the universe kept him around for just long enough to sort of launch me into that space.
To get out of her way. I needed to get out.
So I wouldn't have ever done it without you, though. I mean, I've realized, and he and I have actually processed this quite a bit. I would have never had the courage to do what I have developed by myself. But with him by my side and our kind of, I don't know, manifesting what we felt needed to be out in the world, it happened. And the Latter-day Struggles podcast has, I have lost track, but it's well over 1 million downloads in the 3 years it's been around. And it's become really my passion project. And I do some consulting. I also run several groups. This platform is based on my understanding or my passion that human beings can evolve and grow and change their relationship with their faith, but find peace in connection with it in some way, shape, or form. And this is in the context of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I really want to help people that are in a faith crisis come to a place where they feel like they're not in crisis, but they're evolving and growing psychologically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. And in so doing, they find themselves capable of being in a peaceful relationship with the church in a way that works for them, whether it is inside or outside of affiliation. I feel passionate that faith is such a deep part of our identity that it's something that we have to navigate, bearing in mind all of the complexity of it. And in the LDS church specifically, it's very relational, it's very cultural. And so I think that might be why I care about this. And then I guess something that's leading into hopefully our discussion. I mean, I know it's about our discussion today is my primary love before I even entered into faith crisis is I am trained as a relationship therapist. I really, really feel strongly about couples counseling, marriage counseling, family dynamics. And as such, I work with a lot of couples, or, well, sometimes it's both partners, sometimes it's just one partner, but trying to preserve and enrich a marriage that is going through a really traumatic shift in what the relationship means and how to define a healthy relationship. And so I do that through my groups. I do this through some classes that couples can take that are asynchronous from my website. Gosh, what else do I do? The coaching. I mean, it's just, it's for individuals, but it's also for couples. And just, it's really rewarding because people can actually overcome the overwhelming, I don't know, it feels like people's identities almost crumble when they go through a faith crisis. And then, of course, their marriages struggle deeply too, but people can get better, and they do. And they become more capable of thriving as individuals and couples than they thought they were able to, and sometimes they're even healthier than they could have ever imagined. So that's probably enough of a spiel to get us started about me.
That's awesome. We're glad to have you here, Valerie. And I think today's topic is going to be really pertinent for a large portion of like what we do. And a lot of our clients are trying to climb out of some type of an addiction or some kind of a betrayal, some kind of trauma that they've experienced. And it seems to be the case, and Brannon, you can speak to this if you feel differently about it, but it seems to be the case that a lot of times when we get into like the recovery world from either trauma or addiction, there's always the target that they're working on, which is the behavior they're trying to stop or the trust they're trying to rebuild in the relationship. But it seems that almost always there is a concurrently running sort of wrestle with or development with faith, God, spirituality, and that part doesn't quite get spoken of as much as the bad behavior or the betrayal that happened, even though it's a massive part for both the individual and the couple as they're trying to climb out of the hole that they've found themselves in. So I think this is going to be really pertinent for a lot of people to be able to talk about the wrestle with faith, and especially as it relates to relationship today.
Yeah. Sounds great.
If I could ask, well, before I ask this question, I just want to say on Valerie's, like her content and her groups and what she does, like Valerie, I think you do such a good job at embodying on your platform what you teach couples. So like you're not trying to push somebody one way or the other to stay, to go. Like you really model healthy differentiation and attachment and promote that in what you do. And a lot of times people don't want to do that, right? They're over attaching and they're, and so like to listen to Latter-day Struggles, that's not going to keep you in the church or out of the church. It's going to help you understand yourself better and who you actually are. So my question, Valerie, when you see couples start to, if you see an individual in a relationship start to expand, what are some of the common things that happen within a relationship when change starts to take place in terms of spirituality and religion?
I think that what I notice is, first of all, fear enters in. And of course, that can show up in any number of behaviors, but sometimes it gets aggressive. Other times it gets silent. And what's happening when one partner starts to evolve is they are kind of outside of their own consciousness, redefining the terms of the relationship. And that is legitimately terrifying. And so when I meet with either a partnership or even one individual, and they're starting to talk about the distress that they're experiencing, I feel that the very most helpful thing to do, first of all, is to legitimize, like, this is distressing. It's distressing to you, but it's also incredibly distressing to your partner because everything to them did seem to be rolling along exactly as planned. And I mean, I say this a little bit like, tongue in cheek, jokingly, but it's like, you did disturb the status quo.
You disrupted something.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's real. You did that. And I'm not saying there's a problem. As a matter of fact, I'm on the team of like evolution is good. It's important. But what it does cause, especially before everybody kind of knows the new terms of engagement, is it is distressing, clear over to traumatizing. And so to make that not only real, but to externalize that and to allow that to be the case without blaming anybody as if it's like somebody's done anything wrong, I think is sort of the first thing to think about.
I could see that being really validating for a partner who feels like they didn't do anything to change the system, and the system, like I hear that it's almost like they feel like it's unfair. Like, hey, we had an agreement. We were going to live this way. We were going to do it this way. We're going to do this. And all of a sudden you're stepping out of that. That does feel like its own form of betrayal in some ways. And they get caught up in that place of like lack of justice, lack of fairness. How do you help a partner on that side of it start to navigate that other than just bringing it out into the open?
Yeah, I feel like, to preface my answer, one of the things that I've noticed, or at least I've become more grateful for, is that I spent a really long time, most of my life, as a very traditional, believing, conservative Christian person. And therefore, it's not too much of a leap for me to have compassion on what their lived experience is. And something that I am always really, really paying attention to as I look at Faith Journey, because I am pro growth, I'm pro spiritual levels of development. I mean, I love that paradigm, and I love to see somebody going on a faith journey. But at the same time, I don't ever want to lose track of my compassion for and my understanding of how scary that is for a relationship. And so it's like my relationship healing training also sort of plays a really big part in having compassion for that partner that's in a very legitimate place in their own faith development. They are where they are for very important and relevant reasons, right? Because everybody goes on a journey at their own like pace. So I try really hard to get the buy-in of both partners to help them both feel that I'm not trying to like fix you or change you, right? In terms of like, you need to believe this, or you need to move quicker in your development. And that is in and of itself kind of a tricky dance, because I also am sort of pro growth and development. The thing that I have an awareness of, that I'm sure you both do too, is the more one tries to like pressure somebody to be who they're not, the more they actually end up getting stuck. And so what I want to work with, what I want to work on with people is to learn how, well, two things, and then you can take it whatever direction you want, is I shift the paradigm away from belief and towards values. And also, I think it's really important to help the couple recognize that intimacy does not need to be about being the exact same, but it can be about honoring the growth of one another. And therefore, it means that they probably do need to redefine what is a healthy relationship, because in earlier stage faith, healthy relationship means believing, thinking, feeling, and in some ways affiliating the very, very same. And so that has to actually kind of be thrown out a little bit. And I wouldn't say it that directly to a couple, but they have to redefine what does a healthy relationship look like? Because it doesn't look like probably what you thought it was going to look like when you came together. Because most of the time in couples come together because they have so much in common. That's not unusual, but it's also not unusual for them to grow in different ways or to grow at different paces.
So, okay, we got to slow down a little bit because you just said a lot.
Okay. Sure.
And so I just want to flush this out even more. So one of the first things you said was differentiating between belief and values. Like what do you mean? What is that?
Yeah. So I think there's almost like some implicit agreements that couples make, assuming they come together because their faith journey matches, they're on the same page per se, right? Mm-hmm. And so they come together with these hopes and dreams about how marriage life and family life is going to unfold. And oftentimes it's very much embedded in their cultural system of belief, whatever that is, Latter-day Saint, Catholic, Protestant. And it's almost like they imagine what markers are going to be unfolding as their lives unfold that kind of help them sort of see themselves as being successful or being happy. And they also probably imagine, like big picture rituals, but also smaller, say, for example, family prayer or christening or baptism, or like certain things that we do this without even thinking about it. We fantasize about the future. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, when somebody starts to evolve, that's where we have to externalize what are the hopes and dreams that I kept within myself that are based on like beliefs, say, for example, baptism, that as long as everybody, we get the children christened or baptized or whatever, then we are going to be a happy, successful family. And we're going to be able to be secure in ourselves because we believe in the same God and the same, religious background. And then we're going to be okay. And what we have to do is we have to talk about what are those things that you internalized about what it means for you to be a healthy, happy, successful marriage or family, and then decide, okay, instead of that, because that seems to be changing, why don't we look at the values that drive your desires, such as, to stay with the baptism idea, baptism, you'd probably have to find out what that means to them, but then supposing it means faith, love, compassion, trying to live a life that is aligned with a higher power, and say, okay, supposing we have to take baptism out because it doesn't work with the both of you anymore for whatever the reasons are. How can the both of you still acknowledge and see within yourself and share with the partner that that hasn't changed? As a matter of fact, maybe it's stronger than ever. It needs to look different because it isn't as aligned with an organization or with a system that is familiar to both of you, or that even is something that the both of you can kind of sort of like get behind in the same way that you used to be able to. So we're trying to expand their capacity to see that they are in fact still in love with the same person, and maybe that person believes or sort of has a different belief system, but the thing that I fell in love with you for, you're manifesting in a different way that's going to show up differently, but you're not as scary and foreign as I thought you were, because I'm not keeping our relationship simple. I'm letting it be more complex, not around just beliefs, but around something larger like a value system.
I'm wondering, just kind of having this thought go through me, I don't know why, but maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I'm just thinking about how hard people work in trying to develop their faith, and the structure that whatever the religion is that they're living in helps to sort of provide scaffolding for that. It seems like we as human beings, we tend to want to work towards a place of security and safety, including inside of our faith. And then when this happens, it almost kind of peels the scab off and helps us realize that we live in an actual world, and the way that we are as human beings is that that change is constant, and yet we've spent so much time actually trying to make this thing permanent, that it seems that part of I'm thinking of our clients, the clients that seem to do best is the ones who wrestle with this to a point where they start to accept that the development of faith is going to be an ongoing thing until we die. And that's not a bad thing, that's actually part of a necessary part of the growing process as a whole human being. And that might stay inside of the same church that I was born in, but that might also include other kinds of detours in other places. But it's the acceptance that development has to keep happening, rather than trying to work to a place of security and then saying, set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I mean, again, back to the compassion part, like, I think that there's very valid reasons why sort of a church system creates structure in a chaotic universe. And especially when you're entering into an intimate relationship and forming a family, there are so many unknowns. And I think for that reason, I give myself even grace at how many years, I could almost say decades, maybe I could say decades actually, that I stayed sort of like safe in the structure, and it might even say the constraints of a system that did help me understand how to be a mom and how to do family life. And so it's important for us, I think, to realize that from a developmental perspective, having that structure, the safety, comfort, belonging that comes from that phase of one's development, it's very secure. It can be for many security inducing. And therefore, when the more conservative or the more traditionally believing partner sees their partner departing from that, it brings up a lot of chaos, especially when the tradition itself pathologizes growth. And I think that's another barrier that makes this exponentially harder, because even though someone may be on a faith journey in a marriage and they're not manifesting any high-risk behaviors whatsoever, it's almost like what they're even talking about feels as if it's there are red flags associated with this. If you stop believing inside of this paradigm, inevitably these other several things are going to follow, because that's oftentimes what people have been socialized to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to almost like, the partnership has to establish something that sort of transcends these constraints, because the tradition has sometimes taught them that, either explicitly or implicitly, because it is less. I mean, if we're going for just safety, then sure, stay inside that system and keep yourself small, and keep, don't do the growth. But that's, I don't think, why we're here as individuals or in this life. We're not here to stay safe. We're here actually to grow. And the greatest manifestation of, I think, of our potential as spiritual beings is actually to have the courage to grow, even when it means pushing against a little bit of what the culture says is pathological about our growth.
I think, I mean, to be honest, I love everything you're saying, Valerie. I agree with everything you're saying, but at the same time, like, we're taught like our eternal salvation in some ways is on the line. Like, I think of like me, Jenny, and Jesus. We're like fused together, and and like, do you know what I mean? And like, that's what I was taught. And now I look at it more like, look, me and Jenny are standing on our own 2 feet, and I know Jesus and she knows Jesus in our own way. But like, I think that in many ways we're conditioned to be quite codependent and quite over attached with our spirituality. And when we get into relationship, we throw that relationship in as more evidence of spiritual like oneness. And so I think it's really hard to diffuse this. It's really difficult, because a believing member is like, you're trying to differentiate here. Like, that's the opposite of what we're supposed to do as spiritual beings. Like, we're supposed to galvanize even further, connect even more, and become even more one with God. And so it's really a shift in paradigm to actually then fall into these really good, healthy practices as individuals in a relationship, right?
Yes, and I think to some degree, I normalize the distress in a relationship that is going through this, because what you're describing is undoing on a good day and completely and totally traumatic on a bad day. And I think what it also does is that exposes inherent weaknesses that the marriage has always had.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, in terms of the growth and development of the partnership, but that they have been able to sort of keep at bay because they've always leaned on the faith as sort of their stabilizing force. And now that one of the partners is pushing up even against that, it sometimes feels like they finally are out of their depth, and they don't have any more resources anymore. And so I try to help the relationship or the partnership recognize that, like, okay, this is going to be really, really, really hard, because you are completely redefining the terms of your relationship. And this is going to put a spotlight on some of the things that have not yet been dealt with in terms of your growth and development as individuals and as a couple. And that's okay. Like, we can work the problem and we can deal with this. But ultimately, partnerships do need to gain some degree of critical awareness. And I do put a lot of this wouldn't be explicit, but I'm grateful that I have a massive amount of compassion for the person that is not on the faith journey still, like, because they are being asked to evaluate something that they didn't really sign up for. Like, they need to be able to handle a lot of growth that they didn't sort of step into on their own terms, and try to make space for the depth of their belief while holding the tension of the fact that there is a depth of love that is pressuring them to be pushed beyond probably what they're comfortable with. And I've seen it go both ways, because it is a huge amount of pressure to say this marriage matters enough that I can love my partner and learn how to redefine what intimacy is, what connection is, in terms that I am not familiar with, not even really all that interested in, but I really love her or him, and therefore I'm going to try it, and it's going to be tough.
And be thrust into trying it.
Exactly. And I feel so that's hard, right? Because for that person that's not yet on the faith expansion journey, by default, it's working for them. Like where they are
right
is working, or they would probably be wrestling more. And I think that needs to be appreciated, because we don't generally grow unless we're thrown into, or thrust, like you said, thrust into some pretty deep discomfort that something isn't working. And if it is working for that person, then really the person on the faith journey becomes like the one that's thrusting them into it. But it's easy to sort of point your finger at them and say, this is your fault because you're doing it wrong. And yeah.
I'm thinking about just like all the biblical stories of being called or thrust into the wilderness, and what those journeys are that they go on. And those journeys are actually pretty rough. I mean, before they get to whatever you would call the promised land or anything else, I'm even thinking of Israel, Jacob becoming Israel. The meaning of his name is one who wrestles with God. That's how he got his new name, was the wrestle itself. But what you're saying, and if I'm hearing this right, is there is tension as a result of being thrust into the wilderness on both partners inside the relationship, whether one chose it or not. And then it becomes either something that will inevitably tear everything down, shatter identities, maybe break down the whole marriage. Eventually, some people have that happen. It's pretty common. Or what I'm hearing you say is it becomes an opportunity to actually both be willing to step in and learn to communicate differently, to understand one another differently, to wrestle together with each other. And in doing so, that is also for some couples an opportunity to actually deepen their relationship, not only with God, but with each other. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Tyler. I mean, what kind of comes up for me as I'm listening to you is a couple of experiences I've had, people that have actually shown up on my podcast because I wanted them to break down what happened, because they were one of those couples that were nearing the end of a marriage, because in this case, he just was so deeply devoted to his faith and it worked for him. And she was on a growth journey, and yet they were both so incredibly sincere. And as I interviewed them, spent several hours trying to understand them, and also for the sake of my listening audience, two things emerged that felt really key to their ability to become this incredibly beautiful, thriving marriage. Number one is the gentleman, the more traditionally believing partner, finally was in enough pain that he stopped resisting the process, partly because he said, if I were to be totally honest, my wife was psychologically more healthy than I'd ever seen her before. Now, that is not always the case, right, on a faith journey. Sometimes people, move into some places that I wouldn't define as psychologically healthy, but oftentimes as they're evolving, if the faith journey really does expand into something that is growing the soul, they are becoming healthier. And so this gentleman was watching that, and he was allowing himself to be honest with himself. The other thing is he leaned into his faith, which sounds paradoxical, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he leaned into his faith and he said, the core of the gospel of Jesus Christ, as I understand it, is love. And I am going to choose to manifest that love, because one thing I do not believe and never will believe is that God would want me to choose to walk away from this beautiful woman and my family. And so I need to be able to accept her as she is, because A, I see her thriving, and B, I want to embody the very thing that I've been taught my entire life, which is to love. And for him, that was the turning point in making space for her, which, as it unfolds, when she noticed that his heart opened and he started accepting that her journey was evolution and not apostasy, her heart softened and she was able to make more space for what he valued, still as a more traditionally believing church member, in a way that she just really couldn't do it anymore. And so it was on the downward spiral actually reversed and it became an upward spiral.
I love it. That's a beautiful story. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying right at the very beginning about fear, that you're looking at both partners that are operating from a default place of fear. There's no space for that. But when fear, like, I guess that's what I'm wondering is, you kind of alluded to a few things here, but on both sides, then how do you help get beneath the fear and create space where there is some room for that kind of a thing? Because on both sides, fear will shut that down completely.
One of the things that I work with couples on from the gate is, first of all, I want to diffuse the heat of what's going on in the what feels like their marriage sort of like slipping away from them. And I will focus before we talk about any of sort of the heavier stuff is I try to help them remember why they chose one another in the first place. Because sometimes when this emerges, when somebody's faith expansion experience emerges, it actually sort of takes center stage and it almost monopolizes the psyches of the couple. And so I try to sort of like shift that to the background and bring back to the foreground characteristics and attributes that they love in one another. And that, for me, I'm doing that for two reasons. Number one, I want to remind them. But number two, I start to be able to assess what is the strength of this marriage fundamentally. Like, do these people like each other? Like, do they have things in common? Do they enjoy one another if you put aside the distress that they're in? And oftentimes they almost, even if it's just for little flashes here and there, you see love, you see camaraderie, you see friendship. And so that is one of the things that I do. And I try to remind them also, like, when have you been through hard things before that you were able to overcome? Because keep in mind, as I mentioned a minute ago, sometimes these people have overcome incredible distress. They've overcome death or financial turn, and they were able to do it because it didn't interfere with their identities around faith. And so it's like, okay, you have that skill set. Let's draw upon that because you are overcomers and you like each other. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll pass it back to you all, is I try to shift away from content and really help the couple learn how to lean into process, which is, let's not talk about theological issues or doctrine or whatever. Let's talk about what each of you are feeling in the context of this seismic shift in your relationship. Because again, they find, if we can really focus on that, they have far more in common than they have different. Both of them are generally afraid. Both of them are feeling lonely. Both of them oftentimes are feeling guilt or shame. And so if we can lean into, like, what does the experience of being in this marriage feel like? It neutralizes the heated topics around sort of like theology and things like that. And they can both lean into something that oftentimes they're more comfortable with, which is, I love her or him, and I don't like the idea that she's lonely or afraid. And I am too. And like, how can we spend our time talking about what this feels like, as opposed to these nebulous issues that just in some ways causes like more separation or distress or an inability because they get out of their depth in like content topic issues.
So it's less about like, trying to prove to each other who's right and who's wrong, and more about like compassionately seeing them and their process and where their heart's at, and being a safe space for that on both sides, right? I mean, simply put, that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Exactly. And I'm very careful to say, like, this is an equal opportunity experience for both of you. Like, we're not talking about who's right and who's wrong, like whose side one needs to be on, that somebody needs to sort of change positions. What we're talking about is something that brought you together in the first place, which is, I choose you because I love you and I care about this relationship, and this relationship matters to me, notwithstanding these forces that are pulling us apart. And then they can kind of draw upon already existing resources, which is compassion and care for this person that I've chosen. And I think that right there, in some ways also, it's telling, right? Because I think sometimes, especially early on, I'm having a memory of a relationship that I worked with where one of the partners basically kind of up and said, I can't offer compassion to them under the circumstances. Like, I will not. That would be a betrayal of too much for me. And to me, that's, you have to kind of pause and go, okay, hold on. Because again, what we're looking at is independent of any given topic, at the soul and core of relationship, and also incidentally of one's faith. Like the foundation of faith itself is about embodying love and compassion. And that ought not to be something that we can sort of put aside for an ideology. And so I will like gently be like, okay, well, like supposing, you're Christian, it'd be like, well, at the core of your Christianity, what might this look like?
Mm-hmm.
And my hope is, again, I don't want to come on too strong, but I want them to I want to meet them where they are, while also recognizing that I am pressuring them just a little bit, right? Like outside of loyalty and towards like compassion and seeing another's perspective. And I think that's a big piece of consciousness development that has to happen in marriages like this, is we raise our consciousness to be able to imagine what the other must be feeling like. Because that is really hard to do in general, and it's extra hard to do when it's something this core to one's identity or to the identity of what the marriage used to look like, is to just imagine what they must be feeling like.
Mm-hmm. It seems, just listening to that and thinking about couples that I work with, even my own relationship, maybe the difference between process and content, as you're talking about, is that the content often is the thing that has caused one or both of us some kind of pain or struggle or question or something else. But the discussion that you're saying we would better have is the pain itself that it's causing, rather than getting stuck on the right or wrong of the content part of itself. And it seems to me that the content discussion in some ways is the default, what feels the safest place. And the process discussion needs to have certain precursors to it to allow that to happen, which would be emotional safety, the ability to show empathy, the desire to be curious with each other, to try to get to compassion, because any of us can get to compassion for any human emotion. We have a hard time getting to compassion if it stays up in the non-vulnerable sort of content kind of a place, because my partner might think something that I will never agree to. But if she thinks that thing and it causes her to feel X, Y, or Z, I can get on board all day long with, oh man, I felt discouraged. I felt confused. I get that as a human being. I can connect with you there, but that would mean I'd have to develop inside myself the ability to lay aside the non-vulnerable parts and get more vulnerable with the empathy.
I think that's like maturity at its finest, and strength. Like, I think, like, what if my partner was really mad that this microphone was green, like just upset, and
even though it's red.
Yeah, you say it's red. He says it's green, right? And so she's really, really upset. And for me to be like, well, I want to, fix her emotions and get her out of those because she's uncomfortable. So I'll just tell her it's red. And then that will amp it all up. And versus like, whoa, help me understand how you're feeling and about it being green, and why does it look green to you? And like sit in that with her and really get to know her and understand why she views it that way and what feelings she has about it, and to just sit there with her, right? Like this is hard because in my mind, it's so clearly red. Like, and you should just see it as red and get over all of your emotions. That's kind of what you're talking about, right, Valerie? And we're talking about this red microphone is nothing compared to the energy and the consequences and just how big the topic of spirituality is. So
you nailed it, Brannon, in saying it does require, this is maturity, and this is differentiation, and this is anxiety management, maybe at its height, because what it's calling forth is truly, I think, the meaning of actual love, which is putting aside all of the anxieties and fears that I have. And in this context, these can be like, these are cosmic fears, right? This is eternal life. And to say, okay, this is how I'm, this is why I'm scared and why I feel it's legitimate. And to put that aside for a minute, just to truly be with And again, to circle back to the foundations of both people's experience, because the faith journey is a spiritual evolution journey. It's about a spiritual awakening, but also the person that's more traditionally believing, they're grounding where they are also in their belief system, in the core of who they are and how they relate to God. And so here I'm saying to both of them, because you have this in common, although it's manifesting in a way that sort of looks like you're going down two different paths, the core of any of the great wisdom figures of any of the great traditions is to pause and embody love. And so can you sit with the other and just get curious and just ask them questions? Because what we're asking them to do is we're asking them to learn about the actual soul of their partner, not the perception, not what we wish them to be, not what they even maybe used to be, but we're really wanting to get to know the inner dimensions of this human being. And interest is very, again, paradoxical, because on the one hand, this is really, really scary. But on the other hand, if you think about the way sometimes people have sort of integrated beliefs about what this faith journey looks like, and all of the pathologizing, like if you stop doing this or start doing this, inevitably this is what follows based on the narrative. As soon as they ask the questions and get genuinely curious, generally speaking, they're going to learn that that is not the case. Like they're going to probably like what they hear far more than the stories they're making up in their head or what they've heard from other external sources. But what we're calling upon here actually is a skill set that oftentimes people don't have, right? In early stage faith, human beings oftentimes don't necessarily, like we don't necessarily learn at church these deep interpersonal psychological relationship conflict management skills. That's not, we learn about concepts, we learn about beliefs. And so what we're actually doing, and that's why I think this has the potential to be the greatest relationship enriching experience, because here we are learning a skill set that we can only learn by going through the valley of the shadow of something like that and loving the person enough that we get out of our own way and do the scary thing that we don't know how to do yet.
I love it. Valerie, so appreciate you coming on the show today. Is there, if we have some of our listeners who'd like to learn more, where's the best place to find you?
So there are 3 classes that are up and ready to go on latterdaystruggles.com, and there are 3 more that are done and we're just in the final putting together, and they should be loading here in the next couple of weeks. They are all called a Couple's Guide to Faith Expansion. And actually a lot of what we talked about here is covered there, where we start really at the foundation of who are you and what are your resiliencies, all the way up to helping couples share their faith journeys, what has been enriching and what has been complicating, so that they can each start to, it's almost like couples in this situation are feeling so much chaos that they need some structure around how do I do this? I don't know how. And then the following 3, so there will be 9 total, is mixed faith family life, is how do 2 partners in different faith, persuasions or different places on the faith journey, how do we do this in the context of family life? And these all are, I created them because I care so much about couples, and I see on the ground every day how when someone is on a journey, our cultures don't really set relationships up to thrive, because our religious cultures oftentimes don't understand the nature of growth inside of a relationship, inside of a family, that it's fine, it's good, it's we want this, and couples are capable of growing and thriving through them.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, what Valerie's created is us, to help you navigate through this. And faith differing in your relationship is actually a really exciting thing, and it's an awesome opportunity for some real good connection and growth as a couple. It's not just a bad thing. This is not this is awesome. And Valerie is there to help walk you through this so that you can thrive through this. So go over to latterdaystruggles.com. You can find her there. And Valerie, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, and so great to get to know you a little bit better, Tyler. And hopefully we'll do more of these.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. If this was helpful, please share it. And until next time, keep on keeping on.